Joining us live now is James Brown, non-resident fellow at the US Studies Centre. James, thank you for your time. Now, heading into New Hampshire, we just heard there Pete Buttigieg has started having some attacks levelled at him. Surely that means the other candidates think he's a force to be reckoned with.
That's right, Annalise, and it was really interesting to see the Biden campaign come out with an ad purely about Pete Buttigieg, comparing his achievements to Joe Biden's achievements, and it was quite a belittling ad talking about Joe Biden's achievements on the Iran deal and then talking about how Pete Buttigieg put fairy lights under a bridge in a park in South Bend. I don't think it looks good for Joe Biden to be going so negative so early on someone who doesn't to date have the stature that he has, and it shows that his campaign, I think, is worried. The results of some of the recent polls leading into New Hampshire tomorrow are not good for the Biden camp either, so he really needs to have a good showing in New Hampshire, otherwise I think his campaign is in deep, deep trouble.
We're kind of a little bit wary of the polls, a bit like we are in Australian politics after the Iowa result, James, but you mentioned the tracking polling. It has Joe Biden at 11%. If that happens, is that becoming, not quite a fatal blow yet, but is that becoming pretty dire for him?
Well, his argument would be these early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, Latino, African-American voters aren't strongly represented, and they are really part of that coalition that brought Barack Obama to power, and therefore they'll translate into Biden supporters. So I think even if he gets a bad result in New Hampshire, he'll stick it through until we start to get to some of the southern states. The one to watch in New Hampshire that's interesting is Amy Klobuchar. You would expect that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders will do well. Their states have joined New Hampshire and they're back into the sort of campaign now that the impeachment proceedings are over. Amy Klobuchar, I think we really need to see whether she gets a lift in New Hampshire, whether she can do better than she did in Iowa. If not, it's going to be troubling for her campaign too.
What do you make of the field of candidates this time around compared to previous years? It seems like there's so many. It's a very crowded field. At this point, we still haven't had Michael Bloomberg really come in a proper capacity, in that he's been skipping these primaries and just putting money into advertising.
Look, I think the fact that you've got a wild field this time around just shows you how large the Clinton family loomed over Democratic politics in the United States for so many decades. They dominated the nature of the party, they shaped the nature of the party. Take them out of the equation and you're now seeing a party that's really struggling to define itself, and that's why you've got such a broad range of candidates. Bloomberg, you know, it's going to be interesting watching him come into the race, but we just don't know what sort of impact he's going to have yet, although it will be significant. I mean, you can't put that much money into the race and not have an impact.
Given what we know now, and I suppose particularly with impeachment as well, who is the candidate that Donald Trump is quietly barracking for, James?
Look, I think Donald Trump would love to be in a debate against Joe Biden. That would just suit his whole drain the swamp narrative, you know, the career politician, and he would just rehash a lot of the lines that he dragged out last time round. I think Elizabeth Warren is someone he'd like to go toe-to-toe with. I think the others he probably hasn't thought about all that much. No surprise, Donald Trump won the Iowa Republican primary in a landslide. He will be itching to slice into some of these candidates. He's been a little bit more focused on attacking senators and former staffers in the last week than he has Democratic primary contenders, though.
And it will be interesting to see if it does progress on more what happens to these minded candidates. Andrew Yang, Tom Steyer. If there hadn't been this debacle in Iowa, they might have already had much more momentum taken out of their campaigns at this point. And then it's going to be interesting to see where exactly those supporters go, because it seems like on caucus night it really was those minus parties going towards Pete Buttigieg as the more middle ground candidate that really helped him succeed in such an unremarkable fashion.
Yeah, I was surprised by Andrew Yang's showing in Iowa. I think he might be positioning himself as some sort of successor to Bernie Sanders down the line. He's certainly introducing, you know, some unusual policy ideas into the debate. You did see a big flow of his supporters to Buttigieg. Now, what we're waiting to see is whether that was specific to Iowa, whether that was because Buttigieg's people flooded the Iowa precincts and because they had the field largely to themselves because Warren, Sanders and Klobuchar were tied up in the Senate proceedings, or whether there is something enduring there, whether there is sort of an appeal of a fresh-faced candidate who doesn't have the baggage that some of the other candidates have. And I tend to think it's more of the latter.
As for Donald Trump, I'm sure from here on in it's no more election focus. He's going to sort out the Middle East peace, of course, James, which is a to-be-continued project. There's sorting out the nuclear situation with North Korea as well. I mean, there's a lot on his plate still. How does he approach the rest of the year?
Well, look, the most American voters won't really start paying attention to this election until September. I mean, we pick it apart and we follow it pretty closely, but the average punter isn't going to start looking up until, you know, many months from now. So I think for the president, he's still very focused on the economy, keeping that ticking over. He's just announced this morning that he's going to do a visit to India on the 24th and the 25th of February, go and see Modi, and I think that will be a big visit. That will be a trade-heavy visit, and it will be interesting to see what sort of announcements the president takes with him on that visit. It's an important relationship for the United States, an increasingly important defence relationship as well.
All right, James Brown, always appreciate talking. We'll chat soon again. Thank you.
Thanks.